When the outbreak hit, survival quickly became a race against time. It was a nightmare we never imagined, a world turned upside down by the undead. There were 3 of us, Mark, Lucas, and me, Nathan. We'd managed to stay one step ahead of the infected for weeks, but now our luck had run out. We'd stumbled upon an old warehouse on the outskirts of a once bustling city. It looked like a solid place to rest, hidden behind rows of abandoned trucks and rusting equipment. "We need to be careful," Mark had said, his voice tense as he surveyed the surroundings. "This place could be a trap." "We've got to take our chances," Lucas replied. "We're running low on food and ammo. We need to rest." We agreed, cautiously entering the warehouse and making it our temporary home. We spent the first night inside, taking inventory of what we had and planning our next move. But as the days went by, we noticed something strange. Every night, we heard distant noises, muffled groans and shuffling footsteps. At first, we dismissed it as the sounds of the city, but as the days wore on, it became clear that something was closing in on us. "This can't just be coincidence," I said one evening as we huddled around our makeshift dinner. "There's something out there." "We're fine," Mark assured us. "We've got plenty of barricades, and the place is secure." "Secure until it's not," Lucas added, his eyes darting nervously around the dimly lit warehouse. The tension grew thicker each day. We set up patrols and fortified our defenses, but it was clear that we were being watched, followed. We couldn't shake the feeling that the infected were waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the noise outside grew louder. It wasn't just distant groans anymore. It was a full-on symphony of death. I stood by one of the large windows, peering out into the growing darkness when I saw them. Shadows moving among the piles of debris, a massive horde shuffling closer. "We've got to move," I shouted, panic rising in my chest. Mark and Lucas rushed to the windows, their faces paling as they saw the approaching swarm. "They're everywhere," Mark yelled. "We're surrounded." We scrambled to grab what little gear we had and prepare for the worst. The horde was closing in, the groans growing louder and more urgent. We had only minutes before they would reach us. "What do we do?" Lucas asked, his voice cracking with fear. "We can't hold them off forever. We need a distraction," Mark said, pacing rapidly. "Something to draw them away." I thought quickly, my mind racing. "The trucks. We can use them to create a diversion. If we can set one on fire, it might pull them away from the warehouse." It was a desperate plan, but it was our only option. We grabbed cans of gasoline from the warehouse's supply room and sprinted to the nearest truck. Mark and Lucas started dousing it with fuel while I prepared a makeshift torch from a rag and a stick. "Be quick," I urged, my heart pounding in my chest. "We don't have much time." With a final glance at the approaching horde, I lit the torch and threw it onto the truck. The flames erupted, the truck's engine sputtering and then roaring to life as the fire took hold. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky, and the screech of the burning metal drowned out the groans of the infected. The horde shifted, drawn to the fire and the noise. It was working, partially. Some of the infected began to move away from the warehouse, their grotesque forms staggering toward the blaze. "We've got to go now," Mark shouted. "Before they realize it's a trap." We sprinted back to the warehouse, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. We barricaded the doors and windows as quickly as we could, but the warehouse felt like it was shaking from the sheer weight of the horde pressing against it. "We need to find another way out," Lucas said urgently. "They're going to break through eventually." We quickly searched the warehouse for any alternate exits, finally finding a maintenance door at the back. It was old and rusty, but with a few hard kicks we managed to pry it open. "Go!" I yelled, pushing Lucas and Mark through the door. "I'll hold them off for as long as I can." Mark hesitated. "We can't leave you. There's no time," I said. "Just go." With one last look, they dashed through the door and disappeared into the night. I stayed behind, using whatever weapons I could find to fend off the infected that had managed to force their way inside. As the infected surged forward, I fought desperately, but it was clear that I was fighting a losing battle. My only hope was that Mark and Lucas made it out and found safety. Just when it seemed like all was lost, I made a final frantic push toward the exit. The fire from the burning truck had created enough chaos to buy me a few precious moments. I ran through the maze of the warehouse, barely managing to escape through a side door before the infected overran the building. Breathless and exhausted, I found myself in the dark, deserted streets. I had escaped, but at what cost? I was alone, with no idea of what lay ahead. As I trudged through the night, the echoes of the warehouse's final moments haunted me. We had fought against the clock, but in the end, time had run out for us. Survival was a fleeting illusion, and all we could do was keep moving, hoping that somehow, against all odds, we would find a way to live another day. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night, a bunch of guys hanging out like we always did on weekends. We were at Jake's place, a small old house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the wind slipped through the cracks in the windows, making the old wooden floorboards creak eerily. But that night the wind felt different, colder, more ominous. Something was off, and I could feel it in my bones even before the news hit. Maybe it was the way the sky turned a strange deep red as the sun went down, or how the usual nighttime sound seemed muffled, like the world was holding its breath. We were playing cards, laughing and giving each other a hard time, when suddenly the power cut out. The room plunged into darkness, leaving us in dead silence. For a few moments, all we could hear was our own breathing, heavy and uncertain. "Power's out?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with concern. "Maybe a storm's coming," Tom suggested, but I knew better. There wasn't a single cloud in the sky when I looked outside. I pulled out my phone to use its flashlight when the emergency alert blared from all our phones at once, a piercing sound that made us all jump. The screen was glowing red with a message that sent chills down my spine. "Stay indoors. Avoid contact with others. Suspected outbreak of unknown virus. Authorities are investigating." What the hell does that mean? Tom's voice trembled as he spoke, his face pale in the dim light from our phones. We all stared at each other, the question hanging in the air, unanswered. None of us knew what to make of it. Maybe it was a prank or some kind of drill. That's what I wanted to believe. Then we heard it. A scream. It came from somewhere down the street, but it was unmistakably a scream of pure terror. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. What was that? Jake's eyes darted towards the door, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I replied, my mouth dry. "Should we check it out?" "Are you crazy?" Matt hissed. "We can't go out there. Didn't you see the message?" He was right. The message said to stay inside, but what were we supposed to do? Just sit here and wait for whatever was out there to come to us? Another scream rang out, this time closer, then another. It was like the whole neighborhood was being swallowed by chaos. The sound of panic filled the air. I moved to the window, cautiously peeking through the blinds. What I saw made my blood run cold. People. No, not people anymore. Were stumbling through the street. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, like they were being controlled by some sick force. Their eyes were vacant, soulless, but their mouths twisted into horrible, snarling expressions. Blood covered their clothes and faces. "Guys, we need to barricade the doors now," I said, my voice shaking. Jake and I grabbed whatever we could find, chairs, tables, anything that might hold back those things. My hands trembled so badly that I almost dropped everything I picked up. Tom and Matt helped, their faces pale and drawn with fear. "What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" Matt kept muttering under his breath, pacing back and forth as we shoved the furniture against the door. "Just stay calm," I said, though my voice was far from steady. "We'll figure it out." But in truth, I had no idea what to do. We were just a group of regular guys, not equipped to deal with a nightmare like this. Time dragged on, though every second felt like an hour. Outside, we could hear the shuffling of feet, the low, guttural groans of the things that had once been our neighbors. Occasionally, there'd be a loud crash or the sound of glass shattering, sending us all into a fresh wave of panic. "Do you think help's coming?" Jake asked after what felt like forever. "I don't know," I admitted. "I hope so." But the longer we waited, the more it felt like we were on our own. What would happen if no one came? What if this was it? Then, there was a loud bang at the door, followed by the sound of something, or someone scratching at it. My heart leapt into my throat. "They're here," Tom whispered, his eyes wide with terror. We all froze, barely daring to breathe. The scratching grew more frantic, more determined. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, each beat a reminder of how little time we had left. "What do we do if they get in?" Jake asked, his voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer. I wanted to say we'd fight, but I wasn't sure we could. I wasn't sure I could. The hours dragged on, the night never seeming to end. We huddled together praying for morning, praying that someone would come to save us. But as the minutes ticked by, hope began to fade, replaced by the cold, hard reality that we were alone. The door creaked. The barricade shuddered, and I knew it wouldn't hold much longer. The question wasn't if they'd get in, but when. And when they did, what would we do? Would we fight, run, or just give up? I didn't know. None of us did. And that was the scariest part of all. When we found the abandoned school, it felt like we had finally caught a break. After weeks of running, hiding, and barely surviving, the four of us, Alex, Josh, Ryan, and me, stumbled upon it by chance. It stood tall at the edge of a small, forgotten town, its old brick walls and barred windows offering a glimmer of hope in a world that had gone to hell. "We should stay here," Ryan had said, his voice filled with rare optimism. "It's built like a fortress." He wasn't wrong. The school had thick walls, only a few entry points, and most importantly, a fence that surrounded the perimeter. It was far enough from the main road that the infected would pass by without noticing, and the classrooms were filled with desks and chairs we could use to barricade ourselves inside. So we decided to make it our new home. We scoured the nearby houses for supplies, dragging back whatever food, water, and weapons we could find. For the first time in what felt like forever, we had a roof over our heads and a place to sleep without worrying about being torn apart in our sleep. For a few days, everything was calm. We cleaned out a few of the classrooms, set up a small kitchen in the old cafeteria, and even started talking about staying there for the long haul. Alex and Josh found a generator in the basement and managed to get it running, giving us a bit of light at night. "This could work," Josh said one evening as we sat around a table in what used to be the teacher's lounge. "We could really make this place our home." I wanted to believe him. After everything we'd been through, we all needed something to cling to. But something didn't feel right to me. It was too easy, too perfect. A safe place like this couldn't have been left untouched for so long. "Are you sure we're alone here?" I asked, voicing the concern that had been nagging at me. Alex shrugged. "We've checked every room, every closet. It's just us." "Yeah," Ryan added, "and the dead aren't exactly known for hiding." I nodded, trying to shake off the unease that was growing inside me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just paranoid after everything we'd seen. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. That night, I woke up to a strange noise. It wasn't loud, just a faint scratching sound like something scraping against metal. I sat up in my sleeping bag listening intently. The room was dark, the only light coming from the dim glow of the generator-powered lamps in the hallway. "Did you hear that?" I whispered to Josh, who was sleeping next to me. He stirred, groggy and irritated. "Hear what?" "That scratching sound." Josh sat up, rubbing his eyes. "It's probably just a rat or something. Go back to sleep." But I couldn't. I lay there listening to the sound that seemed to be coming from somewhere in the building. It wasn't constant, just a few scratches here and there, then silence. But it was enough to keep me awake, my heart pounding in my chest. The next morning I mentioned it to the others. Ryan brushed it off, saying it was probably nothing. But Alex looked concerned. "Maybe we should check it out," he suggested. Just to be sure. So we did. We spent the day searching every inch of the school again, checking the rooms, the basement, even the roof. But we didn't find anything out of the ordinary. No signs of anyone, or anything else. By the time evening rolled around, I was starting to feel like maybe I was just being paranoid. But then, just as we were settling in for the night, the scratching started again. This time, we all heard it. "What the hell is that?" Ryan muttered, his eyes wide. "It's coming from the storage room," Alex said, grabbing his flashlight. We all followed him, weapons in hand, our nerves on edge. The storage room was at the far end of the building, a place we hadn't really paid much attention to since it was locked when we first arrived. But now, as we stood outside the door, the scratching was louder, more frantic. "It sounds like something's inside," Josh whispered. "Or someone," I added, a cold chill running down my spine. Alex slowly turned the handle, but the door was still locked. "Stand back," he said, and with a few solid kicks, the door finally gave way, the lock snapping off with a loud crack. What we found inside made my blood run cold. The room was small, cramped with old desks, chairs, and boxes of forgotten supplies. But in the far corner, barely visible in the dim light, was a door. It was metal, reinforced, and bolted shut from the outside. "What the hell is this?" Ryan asked, stepping closer. "Looks like some kind of containment room," Alex said, shining his flashlight over it. The scratching was louder now, coming from behind the door. Whatever was in there was desperate to get out. "Maybe we should just leave it alone," Josh said, backing away. "We don't know what's in there." But it was too late. Alex was already undoing the bolts, curiosity and fear driving him forward. I wanted to stop him, but a part of me needed to know what was behind that door. With a final twist, the last bolt came loose, and the door swung open with a loud creak. At first, all I saw was darkness. Then, as the flashlight beam hit the back of the room, I saw them. Dozens of them. The infected. They had been locked inside for God knows how long, and now with the door open, they surged forward, their eyes wild with hunger. "Run!" Alex shouted, but it was too late. The infected poured out of the room, their rotting hands grabbing at anything they could reach. I turned and ran, the screams of my friends echoing in my ears as I sprinted down the hallway. The once safe school was now a death trap, and there was no escape. I made it to the main doors, throwing them open and bursting outside, but as I looked back, I realized I was the only one who had made it out. The school that had once felt like a fortress was now crawling with the infected. My friends were gone, and I was alone again, with nothing but the cold, dark woods and the sounds of the undead behind me. As I ran, I couldn't help but think how wrong we had been. We thought we'd found a safe place, but in this new world, there was no such thing. Safety was just an illusion, and it had cost us everything. It was a regular Saturday evening, the kind of night that invites you to sink into your couch and enjoy some well-deserved rest. Little did I know that this evening would turn into a nightmare that I could never have anticipated. I had decided to stay in and catch up on a new series I had been meaning to binge-watch. The rain was pouring heavily outside, making it the perfect night to be curled up indoors. As I settled into the cozy warmth of my living room, the world outside seemed a distant memory. Then, around midnight, it happened. I was midway through an episode when I heard a strange noise from the direction of the front door. It was a low, moaning sound, almost like someone was trying to communicate but couldn't quite get the words out. I shook it off, thinking it was just the wind, or maybe an animal outside, but then the noise grew louder and more distinct. It was definitely not an animal. It was almost like groaning. I decided to check it out, though I was already starting to feel uneasy. As I walked towards the door, I glanced through the peephole. To my horror, I saw what looked like a horde of people stumbling around outside. I could barely make out their features through the rain-smeared glass, but it was clear they were not normal. My heart raced. I pulled away from the door and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I decided to lock the door and make sure all the windows were secured. I had heard about zombie apocalypses and seen them in movies, but I never thought I would actually face something like this. My mind raced with questions. Why was this happening? How did they get so close? And what was I supposed to do now? I went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, feeling a bit silly but safer with it in my hand. Then, the lights flickered. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The power was going out. I stumbled to the fuse box in the basement, but as soon as I opened it, I realized the problem wasn't just a simple fuse issue. The lights went out completely, plunging the house into darkness. Now I was not only trapped, but blind as well. I fumbled through the dark, using my phone's flashlight to navigate. I made my way to the living room, trying to think of a plan. My phone buzzed, an emergency alert. The text was clear. Stay indoors. Zombies are on the loose. Do not attempt to leave your home. Great, I thought, as if that wasn't obvious enough. but at least it confirmed my worst fears. There was no way I could just walk out and escape this nightmare. I tried calling the authorities, but my calls wouldn't go through. The lines must have been down. I had no choice but to wait and hope that help would arrive, or that I'd somehow survive until dawn. I could feel the cold sweat on my forehead, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to keep myself busy, moving things around, finding anything that might be useful in defending myself. Suddenly, I heard a loud crash. My breath caught as I realized that one of the windows must have shattered. The zombies were getting in. I had to act quickly. I moved to the nearest room, grabbing a few heavy objects to barricade the door. The room was small and dark, but I felt safer with the door blocked. I held the knife tightly, my only comfort in the face of the growing horror outside. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard another sound. Voices. Real human voices. I couldn't believe it. Was it a rescue team? Were they coming for me? I shouted, hoping they could hear me. "Help! I'm in here! Please help me!" The voices grew louder. Someone was definitely outside my door. I tried to peek through the cracks, but the darkness made it impossible to see anything. The door creaked open, and a flashlight beam cut through the room. "Are you in here?" A voice called out, filled with urgency. "Yes, I'm here," I replied, my voice breaking with relief. The door swung open, and a group of people, armed and covered in protective gear, rushed in. They quickly assessed the situation, securing the room and making sure I was safe. "We're from a local survivor group," one of them explained. "We're clearing the area and rescuing anyone we can find. Are you okay?" I nodded, tears of relief streaming down my face. "I'm fine now. Thank you." They led me out of the house, guiding me through the chaos outside. The streets were filled with more zombies, but the group's weapons and tactics kept them at bay. We made our way to a safe house where I finally felt a sense of security. That night, as I lay in a makeshift bed at the safe house, I couldn't help but think about the horror I had just experienced. It was a night that tested every ounce of my courage and survival instincts. If you enjoyed this story, or if you've ever faced something that felt just as terrifying, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories and updates. Stay safe, and always be prepared for the unexpected.